Hello, welcome to The World This Week with me, Anthony Baxter. A look at some of the biggest global stories for an international city, brought to you by the London Live News team. Tonight, America says Russia could invade Ukraine within the next few weeks. We'll have the latest on the crisis. As Europe looks to be on the brink of another conflict, those killed during the Nazi regime will remember this week as the world marked Holocaust Memorial Day. And a rare moment for Jerusalem. The holy city is blanketed in snow as a heavy winter storm hits the region. Plus, we'll explain these scenes in Spain this week, where people have been competing to eat as many onions as possible. All of that on the way before 7:30. First, though, tonight, America says there is a distinct possibility that Russia might invade Ukraine in February. It follows comments from Moscow that there was little ground for optimism in resolving the crisis after its demands were rejected by the US. Russia denies it is planning an attack, but has built up a huge military presence on the country's border. Let's just start then by looking at the background. Well, Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, but maintained close economic and cultural links with Russia. Alarmed by Ukraine's move towards closer ties with the European Union and a popular uprising which forced out Moscow-leaning President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia annexed the strategically important Crimean Peninsula in 2014. The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, wants Ukraine to remain inside Russia's sphere of influence. It's near abroad as it's been put, and to avoid becoming a Western-style democracy with strong ties to the EU and NATO. So what has caused this latest crisis? Well, Russia has denied any intention to invade Ukraine, but has placed an estimated 100,000 troops along the country's border. They've also been taking part in exercises in Belarus, which borders Ukraine to the north. The UK has accused Russia of increased cyber activity and widespread disinformation, as well as plotting to install a puppet government in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, something Moscow has dismissed as nonsense. Well, let's take a look then at the international response so far. Western nations are threatening sanctions against Russia and are supplying arms to the Ukrainian forces, whilst the NATO alliance has increased the number of warships and fighter jets in the region. US and Russian officials met in Geneva earlier this month, and although it led to no breakthrough, it appears diplomatic paths have not yet been closed off. But one of Mr. Putin's key demands, that Ukraine is never admitted to NATO, is something that the group will not promise, saying it is a matter between NATO members and Kyiv. Well, despite the threat of conflict, the mood in the Ukrainian capital was resolute earlier this week. Over the refusal from America and NATO to give up the open door policy for membership on NATO.
Neither the United States nor NATO are not ready to discuss any possibility to prohibit accession of Ukraine to NATO, and that goes contrary to the main demands put by Russia. So I must say that in my view, Ukraine has nothing to worry about in these negotiations, and the West remains consolidated in its response toward Russian demands. And it seems like the West is not going to give in to Russian demands and to leave Ukraine alone at Russian mercy and before the possible Russian invasion.
The West is playing a very important role because Russia will aggressively pressure Ukraine if it thinks that nobody will defend Ukraine. But if the West is saying we will not let anyone dictate who becomes part of Russia and who does not, I support this very, very much, because it means that the West is taking a much more strict position in supporting Ukraine than it did 8 years ago.
Well, talks between Russia and other world leaders are continuing to try and find a diplomatic outcome. Let's head to America next, where lawyers for Prince Andrew have been in court again. Documents filed in New York on Wednesday show the Duke has demanded a trial by jury on all cases as he officially responded to claims by Virginia Giuffre that he sexually assaulted her. Ms. Giuffre says it happened more than 2 decades ago at various homes owned by Jeffrey Epstein and his girlfriend at the time, Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, in Wednesday's documents, Andrew's lawyers formally set out his response to various claims. He said that he denied Ms. Giuffre's sexual assault allegations. The document also sets out several defences, including that the case should be dismissed because Ms. Giuffre now lives in Australia because of the time that's passed since the offences have alleged to have taken place, and because she gave up her rights after signing an agreement with Epstein. A trial date is pencilled in for later this year. Australia, and a man pleaded guilty on Monday to abducting a 4-year-old girl from a campsite on the west coast of the country. The search for Chloe Smith gripped Australia and made headlines around the world. She was found by police safe and well 18 days after going missing. She was alone in a house in the remote town of Carnarvon. 36-year-old Terence Kelly admitted taking her during a brief court appearance. His grandmother spoke angrily to reporters after the hearing.
Of course I'm here. I'm upset, I'm angry for him, come to God. Where's the mother and father? And why don't they get themselves here?
Well, a local lawmaker said he hoped the guilty plea would help all of those affected by what had happened to heal.
Well, I think this is the start of the healing process for the family, for Cleo, Ellie and Jake, but also the community of Carnarvon, and I think the whole of Western Australia, that he's been able to plead guilty, which makes it really start that healing process, which the community of Carnarvon and the family and Cleo herself, I think this is a great outcome on a very tragic situation.
Kelly faces a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison. He'll next appear in court in March. Other news this week, organisers of the Beijing Winter Olympics have eased COVID-19 testing requirements for participants amid a growing number of cases in the capital. The new change makes it easier for athletes arriving at the Games to be considered virus-free. Of more than 3,000 Olympic arrivals, 106 have so far tested positive for the virus since the 4th of January. There is now less than a week to go before the opening ceremony. The White House says President Biden will make an African-American woman his first nomination to the Supreme Court. The position is expected to become available in the summer when one of the 9 judges, Stephen Breyer, retires. It is a lifetime position and the court often has the final say on laws affecting the lives of Americans. Japan, and a court case got underway this week involving 6 people who say they developed thyroid cancer after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. The plaintiffs were aged between 6 and 16 at the time, and the incident was triggered by an earthquake and a tsunami. They are now seeking millions of pounds worth of compensation from the plant operator. However, legal experts say they may struggle to prove that the radiation led to their cancer. The company involved said it would comment after the case had concluded. To Germany next, and the country's new chancellor led a wreath-laying ceremony in Berlin this week to mark World Holocaust Day. Olaf Scholz visited the Murdered Jews of Europe Memorial on Thursday. In all, 6 million Jewish people were killed by the Nazis during the Holocaust. 1.5 million of them were children. Events across the continent were once again scaled back and held online because of the coronavirus pandemic. Well, here, survivors and relatives of those who died gathered in Piccadilly for a candlelit vigil. Their images and pictures shared on the big screens along with their families whilst people looked on. Well, the Prince of Wales hailed 7 portraits of some of the UK's last remaining Holocaust survivors as a powerful testament to their lived experience. Prince Charles commissioned the paintings of the men and women to stand as a lasting reminder of the horrors of the Nazi regime. They were unveiled this week to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. One of those to meet the royal couple was 98-year-old Lily Ebert, who survived Auschwitz. She showed Prince Charles her concentration camp tattoo and a golden pendant that she'd hid from camp guards. There we go, just some of the moments that have taken place this week to mark World Holocaust Memorial Day. Right, just before the break, a rare moment for one part of the Middle East this week. Snowfall left the region looking a little bit like a perfect Christmas card scene, really. Tanya Francis reports.
Snow in the hills around the Holy City is uncommon, happening perhaps once every winter. So scenes like this are incredibly rare. A heavy winter storm left much of the area blanketed with snow, even a dusting on the iconic golden dome of the Rock. Main highways to Jerusalem and its major arteries were shut, and schools and businesses closed for the day as snowplows worked to clear the streets. Israeli police also closed major highways in the mountainous West Bank due to the hazardous road conditions. The storm has been battering the eastern Mediterranean, bringing heavy rains and winds to the Middle East and heavy snow to many other places, including parts of Greece.
Tanya Francis there taking a look at that snowfall in Jerusalem. The World This Week continues after the break. The PM denies claims he authorised an animal airlift out of Afghanistan after a leaked email suggested he'd signed off the evacuation. Boris Johnson says the allegation is rhubarb. Hello there, you're watching The World This Week with London Live News, a review of the main international stories that have broken over the last 7 days. Still to come before 7:30. Remembering the victims of the Bloody Sunday massacre, tomorrow will mark 50 years since British troops opened fire on unarmed civilians in Northern Ireland. It is considered one of the darkest days of the Troubles. We'll be hearing from relatives of those who died. First, though, as we await the outcome of the Sue Gray report this week, the PM was embroiled in another row linked to the evacuation of staff and animals from Kabul in Afghanistan during the Taliban takeover. The email leaked by a whistleblower suggested that the Prime Minister had indeed authorised the rescue of Pen Farthing, a former Royal Marine who ran the Nosad charity along with his animals. Mr Johnson previously described the claim he had helped out as nonsense. Well, the information came to light during a hearing by the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. The email itself came from an official working in Lord Goldsmith's office, clearly showing that the PM had authorised Nosad staff and animals to be evacuated. Well, Mr Johnson was asked by reporters on the 7th of December if he'd intervened in the evacuation. Here is a part of that exchange.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee has been hearing from an official who says the response to the situation in Kabul was chaotic and has suggested that you yourself intervened to try and get the Nosad animals out, and they got priority over some Afghan people. Did you intervene that way?
No, that's complete nonsense. But what I can tell you is that I think that the operation of pitting to airlift 15,000 people out of Kabul in the way that we did over the summer was one of the outstanding military achievements of the last 50 years or more.
Well, the Prime Minister has denied the claims again this week. He has said that the argument that he prioritised animals over humans was rhubarb. Some of the Prime Minister's cabinet members once again defending him. Here is the Work and Pensions Secretary, Therese Kofi. Here's how she handled questions on the matter during a radio interview.
Now it would appear the Prime Minister might have lied over the evacuation of some animals from Kabul. How can we believe anything that man says now? Secretary of State.
Well, not only is the PM said he had no role in individual evacuations, particularly referring to the Nosad and situation, but the Defence Secretary has said that he was absolutely in charge of the operations. At no time was he directed by the Prime Minister on this. The brilliant, brave armed forces have been recognised for their efforts with a medal recognising Operation Pitting, as they got 15,000 Afghans and British nationals out of Kabul in that difficult time. And, the Defence Secretary has continued to state he was in charge of operations. He was not directed, and the PM had no role in individual evacuations.
Well, let's just stay with matters involving Afghanistan. The race to save millions of people from freezing or starving to death during the winter continues. The UN this week said the situation for the country hangs in the balance. The Taliban takeover last August drove billions of dollars of international assistance out of the country. One of those struggling to survive is Gulnaz. She was found trying to keep her 18-month-old son warm on a highway into the capital, Kabul.
We don't have any heating oven at home. My children don't have anything to eat. They are living in hunger. It is winter, and we don't have any firewood for heating. We have nothing. We have nothing home, and every day, whether it is raining or snowing, we come and sit here.
Well, in 2020 alone, 700,000 Afghans became displaced, many living in desperate conditions like Gulnaz on the outskirts of cities, in parks and open spaces. Temperatures in parts of the country dropping as low as -16 during January and February. The World Food Programme has been handing out rations of flour, oil, salt and lentils.
The extent of the problem now in Afghanistan for people is dire. 23 million people are food insecure, and what that means is 23 million people don't know where their next meal is coming from. The scale is absolutely critical right now. We're calling this a race against time. We need to get to families in very difficult, hard to reach areas. It's winter, it's cold, there's snow. The resourcing need for WFP is $2.6 billion in 2022. Now, if you break that number down, that's $220 million a month, but that's 30 cents per person per day. And that's what we're asking for. It's a massive resource ask. We need the money because we need to reach people as quickly as we can.
It's estimated that roughly 90% of Afghanistan's 38 million people are dependent on aid, and the UN says nearly 3 million are displaced in their own country, driven from their homes by drought, war and famine. To southern Africa now, where a tropical storm has left dozens of people dead across the region. Anna swept through Madagascar first before hitting Mozambique, and then here in Malawi. This country has suffered a nationwide power cut as a result. Flash flooding and high winds have forced thousands of people out of their homes.
I can clearly say that the situation as of now is not that good because my region is greatly affected. We are talking of Nsanje, we are talking of Chikwawa, Chirazulu, Palombe, Mulanje. All these areas have been affected. So the tropical Anna has really created a very big challenge in my area. Yeah.
Well, forecasts show there is the potential for another storm building in the Indian Ocean, which could hamper rescue efforts and the cleanup. Now, tomorrow marks the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, where 13 people were shot dead by British troops during a civil rights protest in Londonderry. The events of Sunday, the 30th of January 1972, are widely regarded as one of the darkest days of the Northern Ireland Troubles. An inquiry reported in 2010 that none of those killed or injured had posted a threat or done anything that justified their shooting. And at the time of that inquiry, the Prime Minister apologised. It was David Cameron. Well, on the eve of the anniversary, some of those who lost family members have spoken of what they remember of that day.
The fact is that Michael asked my mother for permission to go on the march. Incredible, a 17-year-old asking his parents to go on a march. And it showed you the respect that he had for her. And my mother initially says no, because she feared for him. And she actually followed him that day to keep an eye on him. And she actually seen him one time passing. And she actually called out to Michael, and he never heard her and ran towards the barricade and was shot dead.
I didn't even know that Kevin would have been on the march. We were one of the few families that actually didn't live in the Free Derry area. So I went to bed kind of horrified about what was going on in Derry, but on a personal level, not concerned. But of course, to be woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning with a phone call, and when the phone rang at that time of the morning, you knew there was something wrong. But even then, I mean, I obviously knew there was something wrong, but I was thinking, my mommy. And I just couldn't. Kevin was dead, he was killed. Gunmen and bombers. How did that, you know, I couldn't connect the two at all. It was very, very confusing.
Relatives there of some of the victims of Bloody Sunday on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the massacre in Northern Ireland. Now, scientists have been using high-tech acoustic devices to try and record the return of the hugely popular fish, the tuna, to UK waters. It is the bluefin tuna they're looking at, once a very popular visitor. It has begun to return, although it's not exactly clear why. Let's get more on this from Dr. Lucy Hawkes from the University of Exeter, which is leading the research.
Bluefin tuna are really spectacular fish. They're huge, they're fast pursuit predators, they're warm-blooded, their meat is incredibly expensive, and so they seem like these very exotic animals, but actually they are quite a normal part of British fauna, and we used to have quite a lot of bluefin tuna around British shores in about the 1940s and 50s, before the fishery probably collapsed. And they came back about sort of 5 to 10 years ago, and now they can be regularly spotted off the southwest coast of the UK. So they are, in fact, quite a British fish. The types of tags we've put on this year last for 5 years. And what they do is they literally just send out a message going, I'm fish number 5, I'm fish number 5. And on the seabed, we have a series of listening stations. They're listening all the time for these messages from these fish. And so they record every time a fish passes past it, a bit like, I guess, an Oyster card like you'd use on the tube in London. But importantly, there are networks of these receiving stations, both along the British coast, but also along the French and Belgian coast as part of this larger EU-funded project we're working on, which means we can work out exactly when these fish arrive in British waters and how long they stay here for. Because normally when we catch a fish, we know it's there that year, but we don't know if it comes back again the next year or the next year, and if it grows and if it changes location. And these tags will help us to find that out. So they're called acoustic tags because they're shouting a sound message underwater.
There we go. It is a massive fish, isn't it? The bluefin tuna. From fish to onions, the Catalan region of Spain have been celebrating a special onion this week. Residents of Valls have been marking the arrival of spring with the traditional onion eating festival. Now, these are known as calçots. They are a type of white onion growing in a particular way which makes the bulb a bit longer than your average spring onion. They are a prized delicacy here, and at the end of January a festival is held in their honour. Now, as part of it, people compete to eat as many as they can in 45 minutes. It sounds pretty intense, doesn't it? In non-pandemic times, this event attracts as many as 35,000 people. The town also famous for its human towers. Here we go, there's one of them. Now, this is David Martin. He is the winner of this year's Onion Eatathon. He managed to put away 138 calçots in 45 minutes. He'll have wind tomorrow, won't he? He came second in 2019. Well done, David. This fella, Christian, he's less happy with his performance. He didn't quite win. Apparently the veg is best served in a garlic, tomato and almond sauce. You might need a bib as well if you're in a rush. That's all from the world this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at 7 next Saturday as we continue to round up the biggest international stories for a global city.